Hello and welcome back to another Adobe Live, starting the week with Nina and Rufus today. And happy bank holiday for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bank holiday.
Yeah.
Forgot it was a bank holiday.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. You're joining us on this special day where all artists are probably at home and everyone watching as well, hopefully. Just joining us for another lunch break. What stream are we on now, Rufus, today?
I think it's 40?
40? 40. I like even numbers.
Yeah, 40. Unbelievable.
Big week ahead.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us again. Who's in the chat today? Who's joining us?
In the chat, there's Kirsty, there's Pia, there's Oliver, there's Chris, Anthony, Eudalia, Jack, Clive, and oh wow. Anyway, Jackie's here as well. Yeah. Anyway, so full and already chatting among each other. You know, they're liking that, like chatting among each other in the chat. And remember, there's also a Discord for that. In between,
everyone was chatting away during the weekend. I saw that just now. So yeah, conversation keeps going.
40th stream, amazing. That's right, because we started these Adobe Lives from the sofa. When this all came down, and we thought, we need to keep, the creativity strong and the community strong, and let's bring this all together and have chats from the sofa. And this is our 40th chat. I don't even know. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. We're losing Rufus. And Rufus, could you by any chance grab a book from your little shelf behind?
I want to show that I have my little Bond car there. That's my only British thing that I have here. Yeah, I have that little Lego Bond car. So
keeping us on our toes with your backgrounds is great. And of course Nina, who's just sitting here as well, trying to put up with us on this fresh start of the week. But we're super excited to have you today, and a little bit of illustration insight. And we already had some comments in the chat saying, ooh, I have some of these books, and I'm excited to see Nina. So thanks for joining us to kickstart.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing? Where are you based? Tell us a bit more about yourself and where you are.
So I'm based in Hastings, which is on the southeast coast of England, about an hour east of Brighton. It's nice and sunny today, and so I'm in my studio at the moment, and it'd be good to sort of step through a current piece that I'm making in a bit and tell you a bit about my process and the kind of themes that I work with.
So there's many people in the chat who already know you. So I think this is a great opportunity for all of those who don't know you to find out, what you do.
Awesome. Yeah, so we wanted to find out so much about you because you obviously have this whole creative process, and you've come from your, illustration, kind of more traditional illustration background. You're known for your little characters that I pointed, you can see in your background unintentionally, but it's such a perfect little setup. So it's a really, recognizable character that you have, and you've been kind of changing up through the seasons and themes, so we're going to be digging into that for everyone at home who's been following you and is wanting to find out a little bit more. So where should we just start? I mean, I know you had a couple of things prepared. You had a little bit about your previous work and where you started. I think that would be super useful for everyone to find out a bit as well.
Yeah, great. Happy to talk through some of that. Yeah. So, I've just got a few work examples to show for those who might not know the kind of work that I make. These are some recent pieces, and quite representative of the tone of my work and the sorts of characters and themes that I work with. And these are posted on, usually just on my Instagram. I try to do about one a week, depending on how busy I am. But I try to, even if I'm really busy on commission work, I always try to set myself projects, just because it's just nice to be in the habit of motivating yourself in case there isn't any work on, and it sort of reminds me of the themes that I like drawing and the ways that I like drawing, because there's no rules, there's no client setting it. It's really nice to just have these ongoing narratives. So they're based on sort of daily scenarios. Female narrative is a huge theme in my work, so the ups and downs of being female and daily conversations with yourself, and most of it's done with a sense of humour. It's quite tongue-in-cheek, even if it's tackling something a little deeper. And these are some of my sketchbooks. So I work a lot physically. That's like my favourite way of working, is just with brush markers and pencil, quite tactile, quite physical. And then I scan these in and touch them up on Photoshop, and that's what I'm going to be showing you in a bit. I often get asked, how do I get it from my sketchbook into a finished, cleaned up piece? So it'll be good to show that, because I've never really talked through it before. And these are some of my sketchbooks from university. I studied illustration and animation at Kingston Uni, just outside of London. And you can see back then how much I like taking notes, and how I was beginning to experiment with how to present information and how to use colour themes and graphic symbols to break down information. Because for me, that's always helped me process things. I'm quite slow with processing some pieces of information, and since being really young, that's how I've always done it. I've always written things up and broken things down into quite graphic simplicity, and that sort of turned into a job, which is interesting, because I've always sort of done that, even with revision notes and my books when I was a student. And so yeah, one of the first jobs I got out of uni was on this range of pop-up books with Walker Books. So these were mainly watercolor paintings. I ended up doing 8 of them in the series. One of the first ones was Royal Palaces of London. So these are 3D pop-up books which were drawn on separate layers, and I worked with a paper engineer who designed the layout and how it all worked in its different layers. So you can see it's fairly traditional, the way I worked then, although you can start to see a style coming. The subject matter itself was quite traditional, I guess, in more of an editorial reportage, quite straightforward, documentative kind of way, but with my own twist on it. And this is a sketchbook page, which I just did myself when I went on a trip to Oxford. So although it wasn't for the client, it was at the same time I was making these pop-up books, and it just kept me refreshed with drawing. And I'm always trying to develop how I draw buildings and how I draw various objects. And this was a project that I did a few years ago when I started to move away from book illustration and into probably more current themes. And there was an HBO TV show called Girls by Lena Dunham, and this was released quite a few years ago now. And I really, the themes in this show really resonated with me. It focused on 4 female characters in the weird in-between stage of being too young to be old, being too old to be young. So it's post-studies, pre-adulthood. It's that funny, like, grey area in between. And that's a theme that I think I'm always going to be interested in. It's when you're not a child and you're not yet an adult. It's that funny in between where you're figuring yourself out. And out of this show, I wanted to make fan art, essentially, and it ended up being commissioned by HBO, and I worked on a whole promotional campaign for the show, and ended up doing teasers and trailers and graphics for the parts of the show and its promotion.
So how did that get spotted? Was that through Instagram that the fan art kind of blew up and got spotted by them?
Yeah, it was actually on Tumblr when Tumblr was more of a thing.
Yeah,
that was like my main platform, really. I still had Instagram, but like Tumblr was like a massive launching pad for my work. I guess I used it more like a blog. It didn't have the same sort of pressure as Instagram. It's a lot easier for people to share and repost your work whilst still linking back to the original creator, which I really liked about Tumblr. And I think, yeah, Lena Dunham spotted the work like 2 days into the project. She picked up on it really, really quickly because I went crazy on the tagging and just like tagged every possible person connected to the show.
So this is the tip for everyone at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, get your tags sorted. And Judd Apatow also shared it, and other stars from the show and producers. And I think they just were really excited that I was making this work sort of myself. Like, no one had asked me to do it, and it was clear that the themes, I could really relate to some of the themes in there, and I think that's why I enjoyed making the work so much and plucking out quotes and scenes. And so yeah, it was through social media, and then because the work was shared, and over the next few years I collaborated with HBO in promoting it, because there was I think there was like 6 seasons in the end. So this really helped me to grow my online following, and it led to creating more of my own narratives. This is a book that I made quite soon after finishing the Girls Project. So this was the first time I'd ever written a book. Incredibly daunting task. I knew nothing about writing a book and how to do it, but I ended up really enjoying it in the end. And it's sort of coming out of the Girls TV show context. It was fun, sort of developing my own characters and my own scenes. And I think having done work about a pre-existing thing, that really built my confidence up to sort of writing my own setting, if that makes sense.
And it's funny because you didn't have this the other way around, and I was going to ask about this, but how did you get to this stage of being on Girls and being spotted when you actually weren't fully on your identity kind of process? And for creatives who are sitting at home now and they're thinking, how can I get to that stage where I'm spotted in on this big show, and what is the tip? You don't necessarily have to have everything figured out, and some of it was just kind of great strategy from you, obviously being on the right platform at the right time and tagging and all of these tips, but you still kind of went on from there and started growing it from the Girls show.
Like with fan art, I think a massive part of it, I think, like you said, timing was a big key factor in this sort of hit right, I think. And although the TV show wasn't as big over here, it was much bigger in the US and Canada. It was at the time, not so much now, it's been much more developed, but it was still quite a niche subject. Like women in their early 20s trying to figure things out and showing very much flawed characters and awkward situations and kind of celebrating that. And so I think a lot of it was to do with timing and the zeitgeist of the female narrative, which is still very much alive today and growing, but it was still fairly new back then. This is sort of going back 5 or 6 years now. And I think that really, I started to get a real feel for what resonated with an audience as well as what resonated with me. And I think that's why, that's how it grew, and that's how my audience grew, because I was starting to understand what, a lot of the time it was, if something resonated with me, it was likely it was going to resonate with someone else. If there's a theme that's important or funny or awkward for me, it's likely that can be shared by lots of other people, whether they're young women like me or just any other type of people. These are sort of human scenarios. It's not just female based. I just use that as my dominant theme because that's I'm talking from a first person female perspective, but really it's about insecurities and identity and all these kind of universal themes.
Definitely. And you find those little nuggets of humanity, which is exactly what, your work is all about. It's really relatable, and people sitting at home are like, yeah, I've gone exactly through that experience, but they're really simple and, kind of just very approachable. So yeah, laundry day, or, you're already thinking, yeah, how many times have I sat there? But I think you're able to connect your work with those situations. And this is almost so, you see it and you're like, yeah, of course, this is really funny and this is really awkward, but I never realized that so many people experience this. And did you kind of explore the male narrative, or were you always, diving? You're already taking no.
Sorry. No,
like, I'm never doing that.
No, just because, it's always risky trying to adopt another narrative that isn't your own. And obviously writers do this all the time, and it's a huge skill. But I think the old phrase, write what you know, I think I've sort of transferred that to drawing, and I draw what I know, because I think there's less risk of judgment. Not that I'm worried about being judged, but for me, there's just more integrity, because most of this work that I make, especially these examples here that I'm showing you, they're autobiographical. They're more or less based on me. The character isn't me. She's like me, but she is a character that I use in my work. And I just think it's a much more direct vehicle to talk about these themes because I've lived them, I live it. I think, you know, these are really present in my life. So I think there's kind of a sense of sincerity about that. And I don't think I'll ever run out of content. Hopefully, I won't ever run out of content because, you know, it's daily scenarios, however mundane or however big. It's just about celebrating and studying those moments, big and small, and ups and downs.
Do you ever have this blank canvas where you're just thinking, I have no idea what I'm, you know, next context I'm going to touch on? Or because you're just saying you'll never run out of ideas, but some of these contexts are just so spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was a bit concerned when the pandemic began, when the lockdown began. Obviously, there were huger concerns at play, but in terms of a creative, like I think a lot of question marks were present with, not just with me, but with lots of other creatives who maybe were considering how they can respond and how they can maintain relevance throughout this massive situation in a sensitive way or a pertinent way. So yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to tackle it, and I sort of had to sit on it for a bit and think, do I respond to the pandemic? Do I distract from the pandemic? Can I look at it with humor? Is that okay? And so it's like all these questions are at play. And then in the end, I just carried on making work because I thought, I'm just going to maintain the status quo. That's probably the best thing I could do. I'm not going to stop being a creative. I'm not going to lose my sense of humor. I'm not going to discard these still current themes, other current themes that are happening day to day, before the pandemic and after the pandemic. These themes are always present. So I also made work. I'll show you some of the pieces actually on my Instagram here. So these pieces were done. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So this was the first lockdown piece that I did. This was on March the 18th. So yeah, just when lockdown had been enforced in the UK. And rather than self-isolation, I looked at the theme of self-company. So a slightly more positive twist on being locked indoors and feeling quite trapped with yourself, and using humor to look at the different ways you can pass the time, like you know, failing at crafts and burning things that you're trying to bake because there's this massive pressure to do all these amazing homely things, and doing laundry, spying on the neighbors, you know, just all sorts of activities that people can be doing. And yeah, just slightly tongue-in-cheek. And yeah, that piece was really well received. And then a more humorous piece was home done haircuts. So yeah, obviously a lot of people are having to resort to cutting their own hair, and it's just playing with like the ridiculousness of it. And yeah, I got a lot of good feedback for this, and people tagging their friends and saying, oh God, which one have you got? I've got this one, I've got that one. So yeah, using humor about something quite serious, that's often what I'm trying to achieve. So no matter how sad or serious a situation is, I've always used humor as a tool to like tackle it and to highlight the different aspects of it, not just the obvious aspect, which is something sad or something worrying. Or so yeah, people interpreted this piece different ways. So it was me sort of saying I want to social distance from myself, getting sort of fed up in my own head. It was very much meant to be a humorous piece, but I got some phone calls from friends who were concerned about me, sort of saying, are you okay? Like, yeah, it's funny because people just interpret. I think people interpreted this image in different ways. Some
yeah, and I think it's because
funny
your illustrations have somehow really high emotional intelligence as well, if you can say so. And they always touched on something, but in a really kind of witty way, which makes you think a little bit more, or makes you rethink the way you live. Or even the haircut situation, is just a perfect way to touch on it, and you reinterpret that. And I think it's also the pace at which you're relevant, right? Because there's something that's happening right now. You could, post this in 2 weeks' time and no one will find that, as entertaining or relevant.
Yeah.
So it's like this kind of quick turnaround, and you're able to bounce so quickly on things that are happening in the world, in the news, or on Instagram, or trending, and that's what resonates as well at the end of the day when you see it.
That's good to hear. Thanks.
Everyone in the chat really liking your work, right, Rufus? We have Clive who's saying, humor, please humor. This is a bank holiday, entertain us.
That's good.
The Adobe Live show.
No, because I'm thinking about this a lot, and of course, like everybody else, and it's been an emotional roller coaster, this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I guess humor, it has to be approached with humor.
I think it holds a lot together, doesn't it? And just like at the moment, we need as many things to unite us as possible, because we can't be together. So we're trying to look at what does bring us together in other ways. And that is sort of staying in touch with friends who you might not have spoken to. Like, I've stayed in touch with so many more friends and spoken to them more frequently than usual. And some really positive things have come out of this awful situation. And I think, humor is really important, I think, to as a way to cope, not just entertain. I think it can really help with some quite anxiety-inducing themes.
And it's not only your subjects, it's also, and we haven't touched on this yet, it's the colors you use and your technique as well, which is soft, right? And it helps with that kind of lighthearted kind of playfulness, and also your lettering. So we'll mention that in a little bit as well, but that's also part of your creative process. So I'm excited to find out a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I can show you this piece that I'm currently working on. Shall we flip to that?
Go on, let's do that.
Oh,
I still love this, dining al desco. This is for your Italian self, Rufus.
Yeah, it's a great phrase. It's very true for a lot of freelancers, I think. Yeah. Dining al desco, not taking a proper lunch break. So this is a recent piece that I'm currently in the middle of making. It's called Little Wins, and this is like ongoing from those sort of lockdown, social distance themed pieces that I was just showing you. And I wanted this one to be a little bit more celebratory, rather than it's got a slightly different tone, I guess, to the other pieces. This is basically just about small wins, so small victories around the house, and very simple things that count for quite a lot at the moment. And in this instance, it's a girl who's actually managed to keep a plant alive and not kill it, unlike all the other plants she's tried having before. So
I'm looking at mine like...
Yours look very healthy. I don't have any plants in my room. None at all.
Are you a plant killer?
I just draw them. Or... Not intentionally, but I'm a very bad plant parent. I'm awful.
That's all right.
Even cactuses, like...
Oh. That's quite a feat.
Impressive. Yeah. So I don't quite know what this is she's growing. It looks a bit like a little tomato plant or something. But so I'll just step you through like sort of beginning to end of this piece. We might make it to the end of it. We'll see how we do for time. But so it begun with some roughs, which where are they? Sorry, this is quite a dark photograph, but you can see here some mock-ups of how to compose the piece. I knew that I wanted the girl to be like triumphantly holding this pot, almost like baby Simba in The Lion King when he gets held up, like that sort of drama, and that sense of pride. So sort of coming up with a name for it. It was going to be Small Wins, but I thought Little Wins, that sounds a little bit friendlier. And also the quote saying it's alive in a sort of not Dracula, was it Frankenstein that's from? It's alive! Whatever film that quote is from.
Frankenstein. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it is technically
No. That's from young Frankenstein, yeah.
So the next step after the roughs was, this is a very, very faint outline. So you might not be able to see this that clearly, but starting to very faintly outline the character, which I then added colour to using brush markers here.
And Nina, this little
And
character changes quite a lot, right? You don't always have the same character. You were talking about the kind of person and the girl, you know, not being you, but where do you get that inspiration from?
she is often the same character that I use throughout, but she's not necessarily me. So lots of people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's you," but she's really just she's a character, and I use her to sort of channel a lot of my thoughts and narratives through. But she's not like tied to me. It's just more she's my like representative. So yeah, and also like you were saying, Emma, about when you saw this face up here, it's like having that recognizable recurring character is really useful for me, because it's one less thing I have to introduce. If I'm just using the same character each time, you already know, a lot of people that follow my work already know that character. They kind of know her identity. So it means that I can get straight to the point that I'm trying to say, and straight to the theme. And then this is it slightly more finished. So I go in with colored pencils to add shading and other details, and try to get a slightly more 3D look. And then I've added some type in with pencil at the top. And yeah, so after scanning it in, I'll just show you the scan.
Yeah,
so this
scan
is
it in, or do you photograph it with your phone, or?
I scan it in using my scanner.
So real scan. Okay.
Yeah, an actual scanner. It just gets the best sort of simplest, cleanest way to get it onto my computer, really. So this is me mocking up a title. This is written digitally, so I'm using a Wacom tablet. And so this is me starting to figure out where the title goes, adding in some type. So that's my reference there. And then, yeah, so I guess I'll just show you, talk through the stages. So what I do is I select, take out bits, separate it all. So, oh yeah, I should show you my reference. So this is, I always use myself as reference. So most of the time, just to get like the angles right, and it's very embarrassing.
Your phone must be like full of like random photos of you doing stuff.
Yeah, my photo booth reel is ridiculous. It just makes no sense to anyone who just saw it and didn't understand that they're reference files. It just
or that's your job as well.
Yeah. I don't just take those photos for fun. Yeah. So yeah, sure.
Tim getting on us.
Hey, Tim.
No worries.
Right.
So I'm just deleting the background now, the background paper, just to clean it up. So it's just the image. So it will sit. This background is just a scanned in page of my sketchbook. So if you can see, there's like grains and dents, which give it, it just makes it slightly less flat, which I like. And I sit most of my images on this kind of paper. Just get that out of the way. So yeah, I'm just going to clean this up now. Tidy it up. And I always like to boost the saturation a little bit. Just get the contrast up. Sometimes I have to take out a bit of the yellow. Not too much, but just get it looking a little bit more like the original drawing, because it's sometimes the colours are slightly lost when it gets scanned in. And so I just go in and clean up.
Alex is asking us what sketchbook you're using, in case some beginners are trying to buy one as well.
I get asked this all the time. So I use a Moleskine large plain notebook. So it's just blank paper, but it's got a really nice like off-white finished colour to it. It's very thin pages, which some people won't like because it bleeds through a lot of the time. You can see what's on the other side faintly. But I've always liked really informal sketchbooks, so I don't mind the fact that it's thin. I wouldn't use really fancy thick paper to work on, especially for roughs. I do for finals, I use like a thicker cartridge type of paper. It's quite smooth, but with a little bit of a grain when I do final pieces. So this piece here was drawn on paper outside of the sketchbook. But other than that, I use the sketchbook for everything.
And a follow-up on that from Alex, and the moleskin has that texture?
Yeah, so this paper here that you can see, the background, that is a scanned in page from my moleskin. So it's got a slight grain to it, yeah. Which is nice as a background. It stops
And
it
you're
from
always
being too
using
flat.
that background, or are you always using that background? Are you changing up? Okay. Yeah.
I have the same one, but sometimes I vary the intensity of it. So if I just find it down here, so yeah, I can change the opacity. If I at the moment it's on 72%, but if I want a more yellow look, so that's it at full opacity. And this is really good when I want to use white on top. So it just pops it more, as you can see there. But generally, I have it turned down a little bit. So yeah, put it back to about 70. But I use that same background for each piece, more or less. I just slightly tweak the intensity of it. So yeah, I'm just cleaning up now, just erasing, not too much. I try not to overly clean up, just because I kind of like the roughness of it. And it keeps it quite close to the original drawing. So yeah, just taking out some of these lines. And I'm not too pleased with her face, so I'm gonna actually go in and draw over the top of that. I'm gonna extend her chin a little bit using the clone tool. So I'm gonna take some of her forehead and put it on her chin.
Well, that's the way it works, no?
Yeah. Just borrow some skin from your forehead. That's what we all do, isn't it? Okay, so, and then on top of that, I'm going to add some teeth, because I couldn't really get white physically. I do this digitally, really. It's much easier to add white digitally.
Nina, you do animate as well, right? Some of your illustrations
animate
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, not as much. My partner is an animator, and he sometimes, yeah, very handy. He often helps me animate. I make GIFs myself, but that's not. I don't count that as proper animation. The way I do it, it's much simpler. But I'd like to develop more animation. Actually, that is something I'd like to devote a bit more time to. Just bringing this character to life. I think it'd be fun to see her move around.
Or in this case, it could even be interesting to have little micro animations.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah.
You know, just little bits and pieces moving.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fun. Just yeah, even if it was her eyebrows or her face, or. But yeah, again, drawing eyebrows on is easier in post, because it often takes. I mean, you can see how many times I'm redrawing it. This is normal. I just trying to get the right shape, trying to get the right expression.
I love that you accessorize digitally. You have like this good basis, and then you're like, I'm gonna make it. You know.
Yeah.
Next level.
Yeah, because a lot of people assume I just I upload my work immediately and it's done really spur of the moment. But, you know, the reality is it goes through quite a longer process than that. There's a lot of editing, there's a lot of planning. I plan it a lot before doing it. Yeah.
Alex is very reassured that the bird is still alive, Rufus.
Yes,
every day we now have everyone checking in.
None of them have been thrown out of the nest.
Exactly. Oh.
That's such a nice sound.
It is. Nina, we're still waiting on the seagulls from your end.
Yep.
I know, they're really quiet today. They must know that I'm doing a live stream. I think they're being very considerate. Okay, so, and I'm going to bring in the text now. So I've got a scan in the other tab. So I wrote this out a few times. The first time I did it, it was too bold. And then I did it again and it was too thin. So I've gone for something in between. So I'm just going to take that out of that file from the scan and drop it in and do the same thing again. So erase the background. Nope. Take out any color, so desaturate it. And I like to always bring up the darks in the pencil, but not too much so that it's solid black like that, just somewhere in between so that you can still see it's pencil. I think that will do it. Center it up a bit.
You got to get that kerning right.
I know. It's very important. Not that it's technically right, but it's what looks right to the eye, isn't it? So,
we had Jackie asking about the way you work with the navigator window open. Is that something you always do? Have the little
with
navigator?
another what?
You know, the navigator window.
Yeah, I can't actually work without that. I've really come to rely on it because what it does is it keeps me looking at it as a whole composition. Mm-hmm. If I just had it like without that, I'm looking too much at individual details. Whereas if I have this in my peripheral, I just constantly glance at it to check that it's centralized, and that it's looking good as a whole.
So Tim is mentioning this could be a cool custom font, and that's where I always remind people that there is actually a really, really cool app called Font Self, and basically you can use Illustrator or Photoshop, and you just design the letters from A to Z and the numbers from 1 to 0, and then you just tell it make a font, and it makes the font, and you can use it in any application as an open type font. So it's pretty cool. And Tim just put the link in it. Font Self.
Oh, I haven't tried that one. I used to use one called myscriptfont.com. It was a website that you uploaded a font to, like your handwriting, the alphabet. But to me, it still looked quite computer generated. It didn't have the randomness. So it'd be good to try the one you just said. I'm always looking for a good one.
You can also make like alternate letters, so you can choose between various types of
jumble.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I've been looking for. This is amazing. I've got to try that. Because there's nothing like natural organic handwriting. I think it would be really good to replicate that. And it would improve my RSI as well, because I wouldn't have to write everything out as much. So yeah, I need to add in that little, where's it gone?
Oh, Steve from New Zealand is here again. Must be really late where you're in. Yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Late to the party.
So, this needs cleaning up big time. So check that there's no color in it. Just sometimes the pencil's got like a slight red tinge to it. So just desaturating that and cleaning it up a bit.
How quickly do you work from this kind of ideation all the way to the final illustration?
It really depends on how complicated the piece is. So this is quite, I'd call this quite a simple piece because it's just one element. It's just the girl character and the type. So this would probably take, I usually come up with the idea on a different day. It's something, I have like a sketchbook and a document filled with ideas that I revisit time and time again. So a lot of the time they're not just brand new ideas. They're ones that I've been editing gradually over weeks sometimes. And, but yeah, from sort of rough to drawing the final to editing like I'm doing now to finished pieces, maybe sort of 3 to 4 hours roughly. For something simple, it's only a couple of hours for something simple, but it totally depends. If it's much more of a scene or multiple elements, that can take kind of half a day probably.
And let's give a warm welcome to John Hare. Hi from England, first-time viewer. Well, first time. We've been doing these live streams from the sofa for over 40 times now. So there's a lot of backlog. So many of you think also, can I watch these afterwards? Yes, you can. Here on behance.net/live, you can look at the history, or of course on the Adobe UK YouTube channel. They're all there. Adobe Live from the sofa. And then, of course, Steve reminded us that there was an earthquake in New Zealand today, 5.9.
Wow.
I saw an interview of your prime minister, I think, Steve, where she was just...
I saw that too.
Yeah, it was so fun, like so relaxed. Oh, it did shake a little bit. Like that.
Yeah, I loved how she carried on talking.
What a trooper.
She kept her cool.
Hi from India. Wow.
Hello, Prince
Cool.
Gunawara.
Going global.
And unbelievable that on a bank holiday, we almost have 800 people watching right now. So
amazing.
That is pretty amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And more newbies. Now everyone's jumping out, right? Hi, everyone. Brian.
Hey, everyone. Brian, yep. From Northwest UK. So I heard you sing and whistle a little bit. Do you typically do that while you're drawing?
Me?
Yeah.
Have I been doing that? I actually don't know what I do when I work.
Okay. Well, you were
Oh God, I hope I haven't been. I probably do without realising.
Like...
Oh God, yeah, I do that.
You're going to watch yourself on replay, Nina, and be like, oh dear, no.
I have my tongue hanging out and talking to myself. Yeah, I actually talk to myself a lot. I mean, even more so now with lockdown, but I've always talked to myself a lot, to be honest. And when I'm working as well.
What's that?
Oh, I think I must be whistling because usually, well, I always have music on when I work, so I'm probably subconsciously trying to fill that gap, making my own dodgy soundtrack.
Illustrator and entertainer.
Yeah, all in one.
DJ, exactly.
So yeah, I really love using the burn tool, just to up the contrast a bit. Oh God, why do I keep doing that? Just to pull out the shadows, and it helps pop the texture. You can sort of really see that it's made manually. You can see the texture of the pen and.
And we had Jackie asking you earlier on if you ever worked straight in Photoshop. So have you just tried out kind of working on, Photoshop or Fresco, or trying out purely digital?
Do you know Adobe Fresco?
No, I don't use
You might like it.
What is it? You have to tell me about it. I don't know. I'm not up
It's a drawing app. It's actually an app that we developed especially for illustrators. So with illustrators in mind. And it's got like live watercolors and live oil paints. It's got all sorts of things
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we had Rachel Presky who did a Fresco stream a couple of weeks back, or maybe months back now. It feels like it's it's gone by really quickly, but yeah, she's a perfect example of someone who's just kind of picked up Fresco as a way to have this more realistic digital feel, and I think you'd really like it. It's a really good match for
amazing.
your work. Yeah.
I do sometimes just work purely digitally on Photoshop. If I'm doing map work, I sometimes make maps, and I often just draw straight in with the tablet, because it's for something a lot more graphic, flatter. I do drop in textures sometimes, like with the paper. I do like an overlay sometimes, just so it's not too flat, or a sort of pencil texture. But this is my favourite way of working, because it's the best of both for me. It's still using my materials, and you can still, it feels quite tangible. You can still see there's texture in it, and I think it sort of helps it jump out a bit online, because you can see it's not fully digital. And yeah, but I definitely, like you've seen with the face here, like with the mouth, I've drawn that over the top, and the eyebrows are drawn on digitally. So it's a combination, really.
So Alex, you're a photographer, filmmaker, and you've just gotten into illustration. Is there a place you'd recommend to share and get feedback? Well, the first place I could recommend, of course, is our Discord for this Adobe Live from the sofa. We've opened that a few weeks ago. There's already like about 300 of you in there chatting around and, exchanging ideas and looking at each other's work. And of course, we are, also present in there. We swing by and say hi and like give our feedback as well. Emma's there sometimes. Tim is there all the time. I just heard him laugh. There we go. Tim put the link to the Discord in the chat here on behance.net/live.
And Nina, you'll have to tell us a bit more as well before, I know we have like limited time, but about your sketchbook tours that you do every Saturday as well. I don't know if you had planned to share a little bit about that, but I also love the way you're using Instagram right now to connect and share some behind the scenes, because you were telling me that this whole kind of lockdown situation made you think about what you can do for your audience as well, and how you can keep creative and showcase a bit of your life and process as well.
Yeah, it's been a really nice way to connect to my audience, not just through posting like one-off pieces of work. It's a lot more conversational, going through old work, and it's really nice for me to revisit them as well, because everything's archived. I use sketchbooks all the time for absolutely everything. Like at the moment, I'm on number 24. This is my 24th book like this. And that's just from the last sort of 8 years. I always use the same one. I've got them, I don't know if you can, oh no, they're up on my shelf and they're all lined up, so it's a really nice way to archive my work and get glimpses into what I was doing at the time. And it's like a mix of personal work in there, and shopping lists and all sorts of like diary entries, but also roughs for commission work. It's got absolutely everything in there, the sketchbooks. And I've been randomly visiting a different sketchbook each week and sharing them on Instagram stories with a little voiceover. I'm doing voiceovers at the top, which isn't something I've really done before, but I've surprisingly been enjoying it. I'll show you some of them actually. It's
a bit of storytelling. I think that would be quite fun to try out. Yeah,
it's just I think it just brings another element to my work, and like shows a bit more about me, like the person behind it. And oh god, I don't know how to turn the sound off of them when I'm going through them, but I'll just sort of flick through. But yeah, so the first one I ever did, so yeah, I do these every Saturday, and I'm archiving them as well, so they're saved in my highlights. So yeah, it's really old, embarrassing drawings that I did. So starting really, really early on. I think it's really nice to show people like how you begun, and like that, you know, there's quite a lot of honesty about how I used to work, and like I don't even find it embarrassing, because it's like everyone's got to start, and in a way I just really enjoy the bad drawings, because you can see how like earnest I was and how hard I was trying, and it's quite sweet to look back on and realize how you got to the style you've got today. And yeah, it's just been really fun looking at how the style has changed. I'll show you a couple more glimpses in here as well.
Yeah, James is describing his sketchbooks as a journey time capsule. Fun to look back on.
Yeah, exactly. It is like a time capsule.
And that's also a very good example for anybody who's just starting. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect from the back, or like, you know, like from the very beginning. So don't despair. Everybody started with, you know, just a few strokes and going, oh no, I'll never be able to draw.
Embarrassment.
Exactly, because the thing is, you should keep a sketchbook for yourself. It's not for anyone else. It's like, it's a way of you developing your own voice, and I think it's a process that I've enjoyed the most. Like, out of all my work, I'd say the sketchbook is like my favorite part, because there's no judgment. No one has to see it unless you choose to share it. But it's your own way of developing your themes and what you're trying to say. And I just like, with this is just a journal page that I did in London when I went for a trip up there, and just sat and people watched. And it's, you know, it's not for anything, but it's a way for me to practice drawing different characters and pulling out, you know, their features and their style, and also composing text around it. It's just a way for me to keep developing how I draw, and I draw on like in situ as often as I can. So I just think it's got that sense of immediacy. If I sort of, a lot of people say, oh, do you take photos and go and work on them at home? I do sometimes, but a lot of the time I try, especially with the informal sort of sketchy pieces, I try and just draw it all there and then, because it's got that immediacy, and it's way less self-conscious. I think if I planned for it and prepared for it too much, it wouldn't feel like a sketchbook. It would be way too self-aware. You know, it wouldn't have that candidness, I think. So yeah, these are some of the journal pages. I did this last year in Beijing. I did this on a train. A couple of years ago, I got the train from Chicago to Portland across America. And that was really fun, just looking out the window for 2 days, which weirdly was not boring. It sounds like it would be, but there was always something to look at and draw. Yeah.
I'm going to have to hop off, guys. I have to hop off to the French stream. I completely forgot. I'm like getting carried away by your sketchbook. Yes, and usually around this time, I'm hopping off. But I'm leaving you, Nina, with Rufus and the audience, obviously. So just to wrap up. But thank you so much for sharing this. I'm going to go over to the other side.
See you in the French stream, Emma.
See you there.
Thanks, Emma.
Bye, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
And I'm gonna be here like muting, unmuting, because they've just started mowing the grass outside.
Oh, okay. It is a bank holiday, I guess. That's when all sorts of jobs are done. So yeah, I'll just show you a couple more examples of how I use a journal and a sketchbook. So this was on the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was a journey I took last year, and made a book about it. Again, it was just trying to do it immediately, trying to write and draw on the spot. It's a really good practice for loosening up, and it's something that I learned at university, how to draw without being self-conscious, and how to draw in whatever the circumstances or the conditions, whatever the weather. It was absolutely freezing cold when I did this drawing, you can tell by the gloved hand. But there is really no excuse to not draw, I think. We had quite strict tutoring on our course, which I think really helped drive me. And it made me take drawing really seriously and realize how present it is in my everyday life, even when I'm on holiday or at home or sitting in a coffee shop. I think for me personally, there's always something to look at. There's always something to respond to, no matter what it is. You can always make a story out of something. Yeah, and it keeps me busy. I'm not very good at switching off or relaxing. So
it's great memories.
Yeah, that's the thing. If anything, it's just a really nice keepsake. It's a really nice memento. I couldn't encourage using a sketchbook more. Like, it's something that's it's helped me so much with developing my style and getting to enjoy the process and not just focusing on the finished piece. I think that's so important, to be less self-conscious about the final outcome. I think too many people get caught up on it not being good enough and worrying about sharing it and how people will respond. But the most important thing is that you enjoy it and you think it's a good piece in the end, or at least you enjoyed the process. So it's kind of win-win. You don't have to share your sketchbooks, but for me, it's been a really, really good journey to show how you reach an idea and how you respond to things. And yeah, I think I'll always be using sketchbooks.
And Alex is asking you, where do you learn to draw, at art school or trial and error? Maybe.
It's tricky because it's like learning to draw. I don't really know if it's something you learn, and there's so many different ways of drawing. I don't think there's like an authoritative thing. Like, it's so subjective. Like, in the same way that someone could look at a photorealistic drawing and say, that's an amazing drawing. But for me, technically, yeah, it might be amazing, but I wouldn't find that interesting, because to me, that isn't what constitutes a good drawing. I think it's about seeing character in something or a narrative in something and capturing that in whatever way the artist feels confident in. I think a lot of it's to do with conviction and your own seeing the world through your own lens. I think that is a much bigger skill than just learning to draw conventionally. And that's not really what our course was focused on at Kingston. There were some traditional elements like life drawing, which I really struggled with because I couldn't get the proportions right. You know, I always wanted to simplify, make people's heads much smaller than they are, and have more fun with like characters. And life drawing just was not the premise for that. So there were some parts that I struggled with, but like I showed you earlier, like the sketchbooks in lectures, the notes I'd make, and developing roughs. That was my favourite part of the whole course, and that was how I personally learned to draw in my own way. But there's definitely no such thing as like a good or a bad drawing, I don't think. I think it's a lot more subjective. I'm much more interested in like less accurate art, I guess, and maybe slightly on the naive side. I love folk art and outsider art and very candid ways of drawing that aren't about technical skill. They're about capturing something. For me, that's probably more on the illustration side. And that's why I studied illustration. Like, I wouldn't call myself an artist. I'm definitely an illustrator, not an artist. So I think that's the subjectivity. That's where it differs, I think, maybe.
I'm muted. Okay, I'm hoping you can hear me well. There's a lot of noise here. But yeah, Robert was asking, you seem very positive. How do you lift yourself up when needed? Like with that lens that you were talking about?
I think I've always been quite good at motivating myself, and that's not something that's easy to develop. Like that, it's taken me years and years and years to motivate myself. But I think the thing that helps lift me up, or not even lift me up, just sustain myself, is just to try and stay professional and serious about what I'm making. And that's something I've developed since becoming freelance, really. So going from doing commission work for a client and then going to do self-initiated work for myself or whatever, I try not to distinguish them too much. I try to treat them both with the same amount of like professionalism. Although that sounds really sort of formal and serious, I think it is about committing. And I think just even if you haven't got any work on, or your spirits are low, sometimes you just can't draw and you can't force it and you're not feeling it that day. That's absolutely fine. Like, that's what different days are for. But I think for me, the thing that keeps me going is just knowing there's always something to comment on or observe, even if it's not about myself. Like this page here, for example, I could have been having a really bad day and not wanted to talk about myself or think about myself. And, you know, I have those days a lot, but that's why journaling's helped me so much, because it's a way of looking outward. It's looking at other people, and you can kind of escape through that. You can take the focus away from yourself and your own ego and your own narrative, and you can look at other people and think about theirs. So I think people watching and getting out in the world, even if it's just going to another town nearby or where you live, or sitting in a coffee shop and just watching people, like, it sounds creepy, but you know, that's something to do, isn't it?
Nina, this is a perfect example where we would need another hour with you. I hope you can come back to Adobe Live on the sofa.
Yeah.
We're going to be here every day. We stream from noon to 1 every day here with UK artists. And this hour with you, Nina, was, again, incredibly inspiring. I think also the people in the chat, and over 900 people watching right now. So
amazing.
Really enjoying these streams. And what can I say, Nina? Thank you so much for your insight, and also like this little peek into your workflow and your technique of how you bring your paper drawings to life in a digital format. And I invite everybody, of course, to follow Nina on Instagram, and the conversation goes on our Discord channel. Please hop on over there as well. There you can, chat with our creative community and share ideas, show your work, and get some creative feedback. Nina, thank you so much, and I really hope.
Thank you. Again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really enjoyable. I've loved it. Really fun. Cool. Have a good bank holiday.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.